The Wildcats instant reaction post-game show is live, and unfortunately, it is not nearly as celebratory as the Sweet 16 edition of this show was. Brendan Dzwierzynski, Fulton Caster, Dan Lucero here with you from the Sports on 580 crew, recapping a Kansas State loss to the Florida Atlantic Owls 79-76 in the Elite Eight of the NCAA tournament. K-State still has not made it to a Final Four since 1964. Meanwhile, Florida Atlantic going to its first ever national semifinal. So much to get to throughout this game. As you can see on the ticker at the bottom of the screen, the stats not entirely pretty for K-State, especially when you look at rebounding. They got doubled up in rebounds in this game, struggled a bit from the free throw line as well. And despite all of that, the Cats still had a chance right down to the very end. It's a great game to remember if you're an FAU fan. Honestly, if you're just a basketball fan, you had no rooting interest, this is probably one of your favorite games of the whole tournament, right after K-State played your previous favorite game of the entire tournament against Michigan State on Thursday this week. All the credit in the world to Florida Atlantic. They played phenomenal defense at the end of the game. They shot the ball well. A 15-1 run in crunch time in an Elite Eight game is the stuff of legends. So all the credit in the world to FAU. But guys, and Dan, I'll start with you. Got to be blunt. This one hurts if you're K-State. Another Elite Eight game against a mid-major. You come up just inches short, it felt like. Just what were your initial thoughts after a valiant effort, but unfortunately, the another tough Elite Eight loss for K-State?
Well, let's keep it real. I mean, we could say that Kansas State lost to a mid-major, but if you'd switch the conference patches on the two teams, you'd slap the Big 12 patch on the Florida Atlantic's uniform, and K-State had the Conference USA patch, like that would have the game would have looked about the way you figured it would look. I mean, that's right. That's a team, Florida Atlantic. They're 35-3 now. They were ahead of K-State actually in the Ken Pom rankings going into this game. That's one of the best teams in the country. This is like the Butler team that topped Kansas State back in 2010. This is a team that is legitimately nationally outstanding. The fact that they were only a 9 seed in this tournament is not a reflection of them maybe being only the 36th best team in the tournament, but a reflection of the seeding committee getting it wrong when it comes to those guys. So mentally tough, so physical, played with no fear. Every time Kansas State looked like they had a chance to push the game out, Florida Atlantic would get a stop or they'd hit a 3. And in the end, it was Florida Atlantic's size that I think made the difference in this game, particularly the 7'1" frame of Vlad Golden. And it affected the game in two ways. One, obviously, you mentioned the rebounding. Kansas State gets out-rebounded 44-22, which almost doesn't feel real. Florida Atlantic had 14 offensive rebounds, including 2 huge ones in the final 2 minutes. So the rebounding edge, for Kansas State, that kind of felt like Chekhov's gun throughout the NCAA tournament. Like, you knew they weren't a great rebounding team, and you thought it was going to burn them at some point. You thought maybe it'll burn them against Kentucky, and it didn't. And it didn't burn them against Michigan State, but it definitely burned them in this one. And then the other thing that Golden's size allowed Florida Atlantic to do was clog the lane. So you didn't have, like you had in the Michigan State game, cutters running off of Markquis Nowell, help defenders leaving space in the paint for Nowell to deliver passes to find easy looks. Kansas State just couldn't get anything easy. And for a stretch in the second half, they didn't get anything at all. They were scoreless for about a 6-minute stretch in that second half. And that's a full credit to Florida Atlantic, the team that they are. They're good value for this win. They earned it. But certainly for Kansas State, they will look back on, it's a 3-point loss. So one possession. And you can look back at about 15 or 16 different moments in this game that if they go differently, maybe it's Kansas State right now dancing on to the Final Four. And those are always the hardest ones to accept if you're a fan.
No, there's no doubt about that. And to that point, Fulton, the word I used for it on Twitter was haunting, but to get out-rebounded by a factor of 2, you got doubled up in the rebounding margin. The offensive rebounds in particular favored Florida Atlantic to a mind-boggling degree, and Vlad Golden was a big reason for that. K-State, for most of the game, really did not have an answer for him. David Gassan's been so good defensively throughout the year when he's been healthy enough to play, and he really didn't have an answer for Golden for much of the game either. So the fact that you get out-rebounded like crazy, and you didn't shoot nearly well enough from the free throw line. And that was a little bit of an issue in the Michigan State game too. And, in the grand scheme of things, that didn't matter because K-State still ended up winning that game. But this is a team that shot 75% at the free throw line over the course of the regular season and through the Big 12 tournament. I believe that also includes, although they only played one game there. That was the best mark in the entire Big 12. They were better than anybody else in the league at free throw shooting. and you only shoot 66 2/3% in your do or die game at the end of the year. Not that that is the only reason why K-State lost, because it's a number of other things. It's obviously how good Florida Atlantic is and how well Florida Atlantic played in this game. But man, that is going to haunt K-State, I think, for a long time. Those two stats in particular, that's going to stand out for a long time.
I really think so, and I think haunting is a great word for it. And for me, there's one particular play that I think encapsulates just how much the rebounding just seemed to be a combination of size and I never want to knock K-State for effort, but at times feel like they were just caught looking or not thinking you're thinking too many steps ahead instead of attacking the one moment in particular. There was a transition play, Vlad Golden ended up going for a dunk. There was great rotation defensively, and they get a piece of the dunk. It's blocked. It's knocked away. You get the ball and go in transition, and 3 Wildcats just kind of stare at the ball for a half second, and FAU recovers it. It's one of the things to where I don't think K-State part of this rebounding was ever an effort thing. I wouldn't really say overall that FAU necessarily out-efforted K-State. Granted, FAU did show some great effort on the rebounds and their size helped as well, but I think there were just some times K-State wasn't caught as locked in as they needed to be rebounding, which was a thing all season long. We talked about it. This has not been a consistently great rebounding team all year, and part of that has been a lack of size for K-State. We've talked about that all year, that they have length at some of their positions, but they don't really have size at any one particular position. And then it's just a matter of you're thinking too many steps ahead and you're not, securing the simple part, which is you just got to get the ball first. You can't start thinking about the pass ahead and that transition until you secure the basketball. And there were times where I think K-State was caught a little bit on that. And the free throw shooting was just odd that for such a good free throw shooting team, for them to be off so much. I mean, Keontae Johnson goes 0 for 3 at the free throw line. He's not an otherworldly, 90-some% free throw shooter, but that's a 77% free throw shooter going 0 for 3 at the line, and his foul trouble impacted that. He was never really in the flow and the rhythm of the game because of those fouls he picked up. But I think even that shows that just all those little things that K-State had been doing so well, just they have a little bit of parts of their game being off for one night. And that's what the NCAA tournament is if you are off on part of your game for one singular night, you can get gotten. This is a very, very, very good Florida Atlantic team. This is not a loss that K-State, no fans out there or even players alike should be hanging their heads about. It's not like you got beat by some, you say, oh, you got beat by a mid-major and everyone has this connotation associated with it. No, you got beat by a team that's now won 35 games in a year, and that's a rather impressive feat. I don't care who you stack those 35 wins against. This is a very talented Florida Atlantic team. They're physical, and the most important thing about Florida Atlantic that they should once again in this game, they're a team that doesn't get rattled. And there was times that K-State tried to rattle them, and they battled back. And it's one of the games to where you play this 10 times, maybe K-State wins 7 out of 10, but this is one of the times where the things just flipped in. The coin landed on tails instead of heads tonight.
Yeah, they really don't get rattled, and I think FAU has now shown that 2 games in a row. Obviously, the crunch time 15-1 run here in the Elite Eight. And the Sweet 16, too, they were down for a majority of the game against Tennessee, and we talked about this a little bit on 580 Sports Talk with Kevin Fielder from Owls 24/7 during 580 Sports Talk on Friday. We were talking about how, hey, look, it felt in that game that Florida Atlantic played in the Sweet 16 like, dang, they should be down by more. Tennessee has been the better team, and yet FAU is just hanging around. They showed that resilience. They blow up late in the game, and they come away with the win to get to this point. And it was, again, the same kind of thing here against K-State. You mentioned Keontae Johnson. I feel for him, man. He had such a good year, an incredible year. He was, until the very, very end, I think, almost inarguably the best player K-State had. Then Markquis Nowell decided to turn into Steph Curry mixed with John Stockton, mixed with whoever else you want to throw in there, and became the best basketball player in the world. Just an incredible year for Keontae. We know the story. We know all those things. And it sucks to end your career fouling out of an Elite Eight game with a few minutes left. I feel for him, and he tried, but I thought FAU had a great plan for him. And then we do get to Markquis Nowell in particular, and I am not in a position right here where I'm going to criticize Markquis Nowell. He had 30 points and 12 assists in this game. They showed the graphic on TBS during the broadcast. Did you guys see the last time an NCAA tournament performance included one player with 30 points and 10 plus assists in a game?
Sometime in the 80s, right? 80s or 90s?
1990. It was Anderson Hunt at UNLV. The list of 4 players now includes Anderson Hunt, Gary Payton, Billy Donovan. Hey, Providence, if you want him, you can have him back, by the way. And now Markquis Nowell. That is the entire list. He set an NCAA tournament record for assists in the Sweet 16 game. I'm not going to criticize him at all for the games he played throughout this tournament, his season, any of that. And again, you put up 30 points in an Elite Eight game. It's pretty easy to escape any kind of criticism. But the one thing I will say, offensively in general, Dan, it really felt like things stuck at the end of the game and really throughout much of the second half. There just wasn't a whole lot of flow. I know you noted the same thing on Twitter. And the other thing too, at the end of the game, I don't necessarily have a problem with getting the quick 2 with 8.5 seconds left. I don't necessarily have a problem with seeing if Ish Masood maybe has a better look for 3 on the true final possession, but I would have wagered a whole lot of money one of those possessions would have ended with a Markquis Nowell shot. And frankly, as much as it sucks to not get one off, period, as time expires, I'm flabbergasted that Nowell didn't take one of them.
Yeah, I thought FAU was going to foul, like not knowing anything, like not being well versed in how Dusty May handles endgame situations. I didn't know what to expect on that foul before the up 3 final second situation. A lot of teams like to foul there. Some teams will play it out. I think Kansas State was expecting that they were going to get fouled. I think they anticipated it and dribbled themselves. You could tell there was a bit of hesitation from Nowell, like, you haven't fouled me yet, and then he got it to Masood, which, like, I think every Kansas State fan would have been fine, even if he had been covered by 3 guys. If your season rests on Markquis Nowell letting it rip, like, I think you take that at that point. I think you're okay with that outcome. I didn't mind the quick 2. I know I sound like Steve Lapis when I say that, but I didn't mind it with 8.6 seconds left. Florida Atlantic shot free throws really, really well. They were able to get it into one of their veteran guys, one of their best free throw shooters, Forrest, and he knocked down. He went 4 for 4 there in the final seconds. So I didn't totally hate the end game. It just stinks to not get a shot. But yeah, to the broader point about Kansas State's offense, you could see what they were trying to do. They wanted to get Nowell with the big man on him out high on a switch because they wanted to create some space in the lane that just wasn't there because they could sag Golden off of whoever he was supposed to be guarding and just clog the lane with the big 7-footer. By the way, 14 and 13. I don't know how many double-doubles the big man had this year. All I know is he's been awfully good in the tournament. He was great tonight. I think that was the plan. That was what they were trying to do. They were trying to run that high ball screen action, get Nowell on Golden, and it just never materialized. They were fighting through the screens, and so Golden didn't have to rotate out, and so they were left with, okay, it's Nowell on a guard, and now the shot clock's down to 10, and we're in scramble mode a little bit. So they had a plan A. Maybe could have had a better plan B there as they went 6+ minutes without a basket. But again, how many of those were without Keontae Johnson on the floor? A guy who attracts the gravity of the defense. It is such a shame that Keontae Johnson only played 18 minutes of this basketball game. I would love to see the version of this game where Johnson plays, because I thought early on his first shot kind of showed he could get to the post against smaller defenders and he could get to that turnaround. And I thought Kansas State was going to live in the high post with Keontae Johnson. I thought that was how they were going to counteract having it be difficult to score underneath the rim, and they just never got a chance to do it because Keontae wasn't in the game. His second foul, I didn't like it. That looked like incidental contact on a loose ball. I hated that they called that a charge. His third foul, that was a foul, but it's also a hard luck foul. He's going for a loose ball, and he's just late to it. He clips the Florida Atlantic player. So that was just bad luck and just a disappointment because K-State was a plus when Keontae was out there. They were +4 in the 18 minutes that Keontae played, and I thought he was the mismatch. He was the difference. Kansas State needed him, and he just wasn't there. And I was really surprised Jerome Tang auto-benched him for the first half. I thought that was a symbol of maybe just Kansas State felt a little tentative early in this game. They felt like they were in a bit of a shell, like they weren't, like Desi Sills smoked that open layup instead of just dunking it. So they weren't just letting it hang, letting it flow in the same way that they did in their first 3 tournament games. And I think some of that tightness maybe was reflected by Jerome Tang deciding, hey, we got to hold Keontae Johnson on the bench, because that's not something he did with regularity in the regular season, and cost Keontae Johnson a chance to really make an impact on this game. I mean, you don't want to say he definitely would have been the difference, but I think if K-State had gotten the usual 36 minutes from them instead of just half of that, I have to believe the outcome might have been different.
No, I mean, I think that's the ultimate tournament what if. Like what if our guy had been out there more? And I hate to open up old wounds for K-State fans, but Doesn't that sound eerily reminiscent of something that happened in 2019 against UC Irvine? Where is Barry Brown? And look, I'm not going to conflate Bruce Weber with the job Jerome Tang did this year. I'm just not going to do it. But I can understand why that might feel similar. And yeah, it stunk. I did love the way that Tang managed or coached up the Keontae Johnson foul situation in the second half. We talked about this, Dan, when we were covering the KU loss to Arkansas. Like, you gotta leave KJ Adams out there. You got to leave Ernest Uday out there. Get your best players on the floor. Foul trouble be damned. I loved that with whatever it was, 9 minutes left, 8 minutes left, whatever, with 4 fouls, Tang put him back out there. Because, look, we're going to go down guns blazing. We want our best guys on the floor. If they foul out, so be it. So I loved the way Tang handled that. Although I'll be honest with you, my heart nearly fell out of my rib cage when he drew that block call. He was going to the basket, started left wing, cut it down the lane. They called a block, and I thought, and it was the right call. But I thought, oh my God, if this is the way he gets his 5th foul, I'm going to puke. That would be absolutely miserable. To the point about the offense, Fulton, and I think it was really kind of the entire game that this was a story for both sides. When they ran clear, obvious offense, when they actually had plays they were running, I thought both teams were at their best offensively. K-State, things just got stuck so much in that second half. And on the other side, their defense was so good for the first 15, 16 minutes of that second half. And Florida Atlantic, it felt like they were going 120 miles an hour every time down the floor. They were turning it over. They were taking bad shots. There were a couple transition threes that were nowhere close. Now, they also hit a transition 3, which seemed to flip a switch a little bit for them. But that just sort of is what the whole game felt like. Like, when the offenses are clicking, either one of these teams looks like a national championship contender. But when they got in the mud, that's when each team kind of flipped around the momentum.
I think that's a fantastic way to put it, Brendan, because that is what I felt like with K-State. And we saw a lot of that in the first half in how high scoring that half was. Is for a good chunk of it, we saw just free-flowing nature and both teams going and teams playing a little bit loose. And you're right, the concept of actual sets being called and offense being run. And the biggest thing for me with K-State that I saw so much in the first half that I really got annoyed we didn't see as much in the waning parts of the second half was they were moving the ball excellently in the first half. I mean, the amount of passes per possession and guys getting the ball and moving it around and trying to find different areas and guys moving off the ball and the constant, movement and flow that was trying to, you're forcing Florida Atlantic to communicate. You're forcing those different players to either pass things off or stay with all those different things. I feel like that was the way K-State was getting just some great buckets and some great looks. They did to start the second half that way. They did it really well. And then we've noted it. There was that moment. It was after Markquis Nowell banked in 3. When all of a sudden, it felt like K-State's entire offense became Markquis Nowell dribble around for 15 seconds, get a high pick and roll, and attack the lane. It felt like that was the move on offense for, almost 7 minutes, it felt like, which just, I don't know why that happened. There's a lot of things that could have come up is the reason why K-State's offense got stuck, that, the ball didn't move. There wasn't a flow to it because there were just so many possessions that were just, 3 different high screens from Markquis Nowell. None of them worked to get him the switch he wanted or an angle to attack the rim. He pulled all the way back out with 10 seconds on the shot clock, and there'd just be a wild dash to the rim to seek contact. And that's just not the way K-State was playing effective offense. And that's really, for most teams in the country, that's not an effective way for anyone to play offense. This is not even just a K-State specific thing. If your offense is stuck, if there's no ball movement, it's really hard to score, especially against a defense like FAU, who's doing a good job packing the paint, doing a good job using their size to be a deterrent. I don't know what that was. I don't know, what it led to or why that moment happened. But both teams did have those moments of things getting stuck in. I don't know if I could point to any one thing that would say is the reason why it looks like it did happen. But either way, K-State, I think that's where things really turned and eventually led to that 15-1 Florida Atlantic run, was just K-State stopped running offensive sets. And I think if that's different, maybe some of those things change up a little bit, because when those offenses were moving and everyone was just kind of in a flow, moving the ball around, moving players around, both those offenses looked great. And they both had the exact same problem that when someone decided to just stick with the ball themselves and get a couple screens and then drive, neither team was effective.
We are obviously going to talk all about this game, the end of the K-State season and all that, coming up Monday on 580 WIBW. It'll be Fulton with Jake Laban for Mic'd Up from noon to 3. Myself and Dan will be together for 580 Sports Talk from 3 until 6. But before we go, guys, I just want to get a final thought on really this tournament run. I mean, we'll do the eulogy for this incredible K-State season eventually too, and you can throw a little bit of that in there. But Dan, we'll go to you first because you've spent so much time close to or embedded with this K-State team over the course of the year. What is this run, do you think, going to mean to this program long term? What do you think it means right now? And just what's kind of the lasting image? I know the wound is fresh, so to speak, but what is the lasting image of this NCAA tournament run for Jerome Tang's group?
I think it puts Kansas State basketball in the national conversation again in a way that it really hasn't been. It wasn't even when they made the Elite Eight run in 2018, even when they won the Big 12 in 2019. I just don't think Kansas State basketball has been this since at least 2010, and maybe not even, maybe not even then, maybe not even in that incredible tournament run that they had. Did it feel like this? Did it feel like the country had a chance to kind of fall in love with what K-State's about? The song that they listened to in the locker room, shooting up the hip hop charts nationwide, worldwide. People were listening to Lowdown by Lil Baby because K-State was listening to Lowdown. This team that's going to win the women's tournament, South Carolina, was clapping along to that song. Kansas State basketball is cool again. And I don't think that can be understated, the impact that's going to have on the recruiting trail, the impact that's going to have in the community, the impact that's going to have for NIL and booster buy-in and student buy-in, community buy-in, university buy-in. It's going to be really, really cool to see what happens. And it was a joyous year of basketball. I think that's a word that Jerome Tang would like to hear. Describing his team. It was a joy to watch them play, and I'm a little bummed I don't get to anymore.
Oh, I think that's a completely fair emotion that a lot of people, K-State fans or otherwise, are going to feel. I mean, I felt emotional after the game. I'm not a K-State grad. I'm not a K-State fan. I cover the team, but I felt emotional about it. Now, granted, I was next to my wife, who is indeed a K-State alumnus or alumna, but man, it was just, it was a fun team this year. And Fulton, for you, I mean, this is the first time since you've been with us at 580 that K-State has, I mean, I hate to be rude, but has even been respectable in basketball. I mean, the last few years have been so down in the dumps for this program. They needed something to re-energize them, and then to have this run through the tournament. I mean, what stands out to you the most about the way that K-State was able to, again, re-energize the entire base it has in Wildcats Nation, if you will, but also to kind of grab the entire nation's and the whole basketball world's attention?
This entire season was a fun run for K-State, and I'm not a K-State fan by any stretch of the imagination. KU is where all of my roots and my fanhood lies, but it's fun seeing K-State be a competitive team again. And more importantly, I think what K-State showed us this season, and the fact that they grabbed a lot of the national spotlight, is in sports, if you are just fun and you ooze happiness and joy and positive energy, people will eat that up in the best way, and that they love teams that not only play well, but teams that are fun and positive and interject happiness and positive energy into the game. And that's what K-State was. And that's what Jerome Tang was. From the day he was hired, he was a guy who was here, to point out that, we're not just going to be trying to being a good basketball team again. We're just be a good program again. But I'm going to run this program based on the concept of you can be winners by just loving your guys, loving the guys around you, and building a program out of joy and fun and love and happiness. And that's just such a good thing, and a good thing for a team to put into the sports consciousness. And then the biggest thing for me to, looking back on this season, I've said this, I feel like almost once a day for the past 3 months. It is a pleasure to watch Markquis Nowell play basketball. It is unbridled joy to watch that man with a basketball in his hands. I said it, on our Sweet 16 recap. It is like watching Picasso paint a painting when you see Markquis Nowell on a basketball court. And I am legitimately bummed and a level of sad that I will at least will never at a college level or in a K-State uniform ever get to see Markquis Nowell play basketball again. I hope someone gives him a shot at the next level so that I can continue to watch him do what he does. But it is a bummer that we no longer get to see the fun and the great things he does on a basketball court. And this was a very fun team that came together in a very, unique way. And we're never going to get to see this specific team run again. But no matter what, I think what we have learned is Jerome Tang is a heck of a head coach. He's going to be a great leader for this K-State team for how many years to come. And honestly, I don't care what athletes are wearing the jerseys. As long as Jerome Tang is leading this team, K-State's going to have a chance to do a lot of special things.
And I hope that if you're a K-State fan, alumnus, whatever, you did take a moment to just step back and appreciate what this run was, because things have really sucked for the last 3 years going into this season, because you are cool, because you've got Cameron and Mace and Jadakiss was there today who are taking it in. They wanted to see the Kansas State point guard. They wanted to see Kansas State basketball. Social media has been blowing up all things K-State in really several weeks now, but especially over the last few days. Like, this was the cool team. And I don't think K-State is always considered one of those like cool programs in basketball or in college sports. Like, that's a good place to be. To your point about Nowell, by the way, Fulton, this is a tweet that was just sent out by ESPN Stats and Info. Markquis Nowell in his last 2 games, Sweet 16 and Elite 8, 25 points a game, 15.5 assists per game, 5 steals a contest. He had exactly 5 in each game. He's the first men's Division I or NBA player to average that line in a 2-game stretch in the last 25 years. Like, I hope everyone who's even a basketball fan takes a moment to appreciate, we genuinely, legitimately just saw one of the great individual NCAA tournament runs of all time. And I hope people appreciate it. And I hope at some point, once, the wound heals up and you can look back fondly, K-State fans, at what this run was like, you can watch a tournament replay or highlights and say, oh my God, this dude was incredible. This guy went from loose cannon a year ago, and even at the start of this year, to suddenly the story of college basketball. I really hope K-State fans are able to appreciate that. It was a great year. It was a great tournament run, a run that will not be forgotten anytime soon, and you best believe is going to be talked about plenty on the recruiting trail for K-State in the near future as well. All the congrats in the world to Florida Atlantic. They were severely underseeded as a 9. They actually came into this game, as Dan mentioned, better in the KenPom, higher ranked in KenPom than K-State was entering this game. That is a hell of a team. Dusty May is a heck of a coach. They got a lot of talented players, and they were a buzzsaw late in the second half, and that's why K-State's season comes to an end with a heartbreaking, albeit valiant effort and a 79-76 loss to Florida Atlantic. We are going to talk all about this game again coming up on Monday. Fulton will be with Jake Laban for Mic'd Up from noon to 3. It'll be myself and Dan as well from 3 to 6 on 580 Sports Talk. Of course, make sure you're staying tuned for all of our post-game coverage at our website, 580wibw.com, and make sure you're subscribed to Sports on 580 WIBW on YouTube for more of our video content as well. We will talk to you on Monday to recap K-State's loss in the Elite 8 to Florida Atlantic. We'll talk to you